Hello and welcome to Mike's Daily Podcast. It is Mike Matthews doing this podcasting thing. We've been doing it self-produced. I say we, and it's actually just me doing the website, doing the podcast since 2008, late 2008. And we have done, I think today is episode 2941, bringing it to you daily, doing this podcasting thing, doing the podcasting thing way before people were doing it. And have done it much longer than a lot of people have done it. Some people just say, I'm going to start a podcast. And then they do 2 or 3 and they're done. So we keep going, and we got some interesting news, facts. What will we call this? Exploratory cultural swag we'll throw at you. And hopefully you'll put it on and enjoy it as we go into Café Anyway. Let me open the door for you. Café Anyway. Welcome to Café Anyway.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
It's FF episode 2941, and Mike Matthews podcasting from podCastro Valley. Mike's Daily Podcast. At Café Anyway, the last place on earth in the land of Meritopia, and Mike Matthews doing a podcast. And I guess everybody else is doing a podcast. It seems to be something that's really big, and it's probably going to get bigger when people find out the things that may trigger people into listening to podcasts, like having 26 million views. Mike's Daily Podcast. So Joe Rogan has an exclusive contract with Spotify, yet he still has Mike's a YouTube channel. Daily I read that Podcast and got slightly confused. Yeah. But he had 26 million views within the first 24 hours was the big news. And the other big news from that story about him interviewing Trump was the weave, which I have not really heard. I guess I don't immerse myself so much into politics as I thought I did, but I didn't know what the weave was. And I guess it's not the thing on top of Trump's head. It's definitely the thing on top of Elton John's head. He's admitted as such. And it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to make it look that good. You know, speaking as a bald man, I would never get a weave. Never. It looks just too, and you know, I'm all about embracing the way the body goes. The wrinkles, the gray hairs, everything. I'm not going to color the hairs, the gray hairs on my face, because there's none on top of my head. I'm all about being au natural with the way you get old. I embrace my getting old. I'm from that camp. My mom was like that. My dad was like that. Staying away from the Botox and the things they find out about Botox, that people are using it completely too much. So your body builds up antigens and fights the Botox, and you can't do facial expressions anymore. And you do so much communication through your face. And I do have a communications degree, so I probably should be good in that.
And here's today's podcast picture.
That's the thing I got from UC Santa Barbara. My communications degree, so I guess I need my face to communicate. Though this is a podcast and you can't see my face unless you go to the Facebook channel. There's a link at mikesdailypodcast.com. You can see the videoing of that, which is really boring. But what's not boring is the podcast picture. It's some crazy looking Castro Valley pumpkins, the lit up variety, as we get close to Halloween. See that picture at mikesdailypodcast.com. And so what apparently the weave is the tangent thing that Trump does, the Trump tangents. We should probably call them Trump-gents. The late great Basil the Boxer would probably agree with that. He would say, hey, that's a great way he came up with that name, Trump-gents. Although those are probably all that's the bro culture that's into Trump. They're called Trump gents. There's all kinds of possibilities. But presidential candidates have finally recognized the power of podcasts and YouTube. There are 135 million people listening to a podcast monthly. Not this one, but there are podcasts that lots of people are listening to. One of them being Call Her Daddy, which Kamala Harris was on, and Smartless. They reach as many, if not more, listeners every week than cable news shows do. Now, I don't know in this article, which I pulled from Rob Black, and speaking of podcasts, I do produce his podcast, and he is heard on AM 1220 KDOW weekday mornings and on Cron TV Monday through Thursday in the 9 o'clock hour. And if you do watch the video on Facebook, I have a hat that's suddenly...
Is that why you're bald, Mike?
It covers my bald head. Thank you, sir.
Oh.
Annoying man. Yes, it pops up on top of my head every couple of seconds for some bizarre reason. So see that at mikesdailypodcast.com. But yes, Donald Trump has conducted a tour of podcasts hosted popular among young white dudes. What? I guess what Rob was trying to say is he's touring podcasts that are hosted by young white dudes that are very popular. Got it. Okay, Kamala Harris has tried to shore up her strengths appearing on Call Her Daddy, trying to appeal to young women, and All the Smoke, which appeals to black men. Not what? Now, I don't know if these are visual podcasts. They're probably a little bit of both. Especially when you have a big guest on, you probably want the cameras on. Do you remember back when the WTF podcast hosted by the guy, the comedian that was all the rage for a second, and now I can't think of his name, and he hosted it out of his garage, and they even did a show.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
A show on IFC. Yeah, Danger, don't watch it. It's not that good. The actor. Anyway, Café Anyway and the comedian. It'll pop into my head in a second. Mark Maron. Wow. That took a second. Brain cells aren't firing quite as well. My weave is not as good today. It appears that, he used to, I don't know if he did video it. Maybe he did. He definitely did when Obama was on. But that was a big deal when Obama showed up on a podcast. Is what, whoa, wow, really? Presidents will show up on podcasts? Now it is all just normal. Call Her Daddy, which is aimed at a female audience, averages 5 million weekly listeners. 5 million. Both candidates have recognized TV stations, newspapers, cable news, magazines. They aren't enough. While still powerful, they don't reach as many young, persuadable voters. Trump's marathon sit-down with Rogan, I think it was over 3 hours.
Hey, good looking. We'll be back to pick you up later.
And they talked into Mr. Microphones. No, they talked into, it looked like those Shure microphones. And Trump sat in front of like a curtain, and Joe Rogan was in front of some nice neon sign thing. Which, let me tell you, I knew a guy that made signs, specialized signs. That was his thing. He was employed to make really cool looking, I don't think it was neon, but he did all kinds of other materials. And I still have a sign he made when I did a radio show in Ventura County for 11 years called the Queje Santa Fe Cafe. He made a sign for that on this nice, strong plastic. It was like a plastic thing that you could hang up. That's all I can describe it as. I still have it. It looks great. As we go outside of Café Anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast, somewhere in PodCastro Valley, the last place on earth, in the land of Ameritopica. And speaking of topicas, here's a different one. I know. If you're not doing a podcast, this really doesn't make you think like, anyway, let's talk about something else. Perhaps you're using your credit card too much. Credit cards with category-specific rewards can be a great way to rack up miles or points. As you've got to use your credit card to buy something. Oh, what can I also be putting points away to get for free later on? Hotels, airline tickets, groceries, gasoline, restaurants. Rob says, I don't use debit cards ever. Why get 0% back when you can get 2%, 3%, 4%, even 6% on things? Credit cards offer more loss protection than debit cards too, because if someone steals your debit card, they can get right into your bank account. If they have, I think they got to have the right PIN number, etc. The points guys, card critics, bankrate.com, They have easy to see categories. You should look for well-rounded benefits with one card or maybe 3 or 4 cards to cover 4 or 5 categories. Rob says he has a travel card that gets him 3% for hotels, plane tickets, and Ubers. He has a 4% card for groceries, restaurants, and gasoline. And I think that would definitely be Costco has that. I've got one of those, I think.
Mike is awesome.
Thank you, Rob. Well, I do, because I go to Costco. If you have a Costco membership, it does you well to get a Costco card. I think it's through Citibank, because then you are able to get some percentage back with that when you pay for Costco stuff. He says he also has a card for pre-sale access on concert tickets. Oh, I gotta look that up. Everything else, he says he has a 2% cashback card. I have not been able to find that. I have found the 1.5%, almost 2%, which if there's not a category you can, because sometimes it's like, what exactly does it, if I pay for this, what category does this fall into? Is this groceries? Is this an online retail purchase? Because sometimes you think, even though you're paying for something online, it's not a retail purchase. It's just an online purchase, but it's got to be a specific online retail website. So these are things to think about to make some money back in this crazy world. And speaking of Peloton partners with Costco, has partnered with Costco to sell Bike Plus as it looks to reach young, wealthy consumers. And it is, let's see, it costs $2,000 compared to the typical price of $2,495. Is it a trap? Maybe. I don't know. The Peloton thing. I'm not a big fan of riding a bike and not going anywhere. Just being in one spot, which that seems to me what Peloton is. Let's see. Oh, what are the prices for the World Series? He's got that here. The Dodger game. See, the early games where you're sitting behind the Dodger dugout cost $25,894. $849 to be exact, but that, wow, over $25,000 to see a ball game. And then if you want a second level seat, that's about $1,500 for the World Series. And then this little interesting bit that Blade Runner, the producer for the movie Blade Runner 2049, he sued Tesla, saying that Tesla ripped off copyrighted imagery for its recent robo-taxi reveal, the big one they had with Elon Musk. That was like Friday or Thursday night, a couple weeks back. Yeah. Saying, hey, anything futuristic. Anything futuristic belongs to me. I'm the guy that came with that Blade Runner movie that Mike didn't see. But everything that has to do with the future belongs to me, is what the producer said. Okay. Outside of Café Anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, look who's here. Hello, my master, it's Madame Rootabega. I can't wait for Halloween so I can scare little children. Ooh. And do you scare them with your crazy costume you put on? Yes. And your crazy hair? Yes. Do you put on that record that has all the scary sounds like cats going "Rawr!" and thunder and that record? Do you play that? No. Oh, that was a great record. I used to play that as a kid. That explains everything, doesn't it? You know, we were talking about podcasts. What exactly are good podcast numbers? I went to a website called Ayusha about this, and I ended up opening an account with them, a free account, but then I realized that they They wanted complete control of my RSS feed. RSS feeds are big if you have an audio podcast. Because as far as I know, they don't do RSS feeds with video podcasts. They can't. It's too much info. And I'm sure that's coming someday. But what happens with a audio podcast, see, I don't need YouTube. YouTube has banned me before. Me, Mike Matthews, with maybe one listen a show. And thank you, Chewbacca, for listening to my show. The thing is with YouTube, if they ban you, if they block you, you're done. You got to start all over again. Maybe you've gotten thousands and thousands of subscribers, maybe millions. And now it's gone, all gone. Now, I have heard that YouTube, if you have millions of subscribers, they are less likely to deplatform you because you are making them money. And they don't want to kill the cash cow or the goose that lays the golden egg. So they just leave you alone. But I have heard others get deplatformed for stupid things. Now, I have been banned from YouTube for simply saying words like, oh, wow, people are saying crazy things about the climate and not saying specific, I didn't say anything like this. I'll probably get something slapped just for saying those words. And they look at your words because now they can pull all your words out of what you're saying and dissect them. And there was something about ballot harvesting I was looking into. And that's all I'm going to say about that because I'm probably going to get this episode banned. So I was just looking into what does that word mean? And suddenly I was suspended from YouTube for a month. Thankfully, I've got an RSS feed. People still could listen to me through Spotify, through all the other places I go through, Podomatic, podcast.com, through Launch FM. What is this? Launchpad DM. I know. What does that mean exactly? Okay. And there's a couple other ones. So I was fine. Oh, Spreaker. So Ausha, A-U-S-H-A, said podcast downloads are the golden metric in podcasting. Even though there are many other statistics that track a podcast performances, podcast downloads get all the attention. So a good question is, what number of downloads means success?
Later that day.
Oh boy. Had a coughing fit there that took most of the day. So we're back later in the day. So it says, a good question is what number of downloads means success. Like all the best questions in podcasting, the answer to this one is, it depends. But don't worry, it says we are not going to leave you hanging there. We are going to dive into the numbers and talk about details. When you finish reading, and they have some kind of emoji, the guy with the glasses. When you finish reading this, you should have a decent idea of what your target download goal is. Okay. Let's see. It says, no utopia. The first thing you should know about podcasts.
What was that all about?
Well, what it is about is that podcast downloads is that there is no one centralized, transparent source where you can find all the podcast download statistics for each show. So do not wear yourself out looking for it. That is one thing I saw in some of the articles about this Joe Rogan interview with Trump. Wow! Is that there was
huge.
You could easily see with YouTube what the number of views was, because they make that so easy and explicit for you. But as far as how many that Spotify has the amount of times it was watched, they don't tell you that right off the bat. They'll have to release that at some point, that information, if they want to. In fact, the podcast download stats for individual shows is basically impossible to get a hold of, even if you pay a lot of money for a podcast database and research platform, like some podcast companies do. Chances are
Mike, how are you?
I'm good. Chances are, I just coughed a lot recently, but thanks for asking. Chances are you are not going to get the detailed info you really want. The good news is, though, and I don't understand why some podcasters actually cough into the microphone. That is That's another thing that confuses me in this world. Like, it's okay to talk this far away from the microphone, which a lot of podcasters do. Hey, guys, how's it going? And the other thing they do is cough right into the microphone while they're doing a show. Don't get it. The good news is that if your show is not getting many downloads right now, no one else really knows. If fear of embarrassment or failure is what is holding you back, use this fact to empower you. And actually, this is true. I've known a lot of podcasters who brag about how many listeners they have, and there's no way to verify it. Only you and your hosting platform will know your true metrics.
What is the matter with you?
That's it. I just want to get to the truth, sir. And this company, Ayusha, says our lips are sealed about your true metrics. So it says here, on social media, the stats tend to be big. This ain't social media. A Facebook ad can make hundreds of thousands of impressions in a day or two. A tweet can get thousands of views in 15 minutes. An Instagram selfie can get you dozens of quick likes. And TikTok does the same thing from what I've seen. If your dopamine meter is calibrated to social media positive feedback, you are going to need to recalibrate if you want to be a podcaster. The same goes for what you consider success. Podcast downloads are tough to earn. Most listeners do not just download and keep scrolling. If they download, chances are they have made the decision to give you at least 30 minutes of their day. And that's a big deal. So to a podcaster, downloads.
257,000 votes. This happened last week. A judge ruled in Georgia that are missing from the 2020 election. This just came out. You're behind. So
your source is trust me, bro? That's your source?
Trust me, bro. Ayusha is saying trust me, bro, on this. So according to trust me, bro, I have a lot of podcast listeners. According to Listen Notes, a trusted podcast database, right now there are about 3 million podcasts and 160 million episodes in the world. Of those 3 million, podcasts, 1.8 million podcasts are in English, and 1.9 million are made in the U.S. So that means the rest are not in English. There are a ton of new podcasts that started during the pandemic, and in 2020, new podcasts doubled during during the times of the pandemic, especially because everybody had to learn how to use Zoom. And then if you could do Zoom, you could do a podcast, because then you could just take the audio or the video and upload it. Now
there's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
One thing, when all this ends, the election, not the world, but when the campaigns end, I'm going to miss, what's his name? Stand-up comedian Obama is going to be gone. He won't be doing the campaign and the rallies and doing his funny shtick and saying things like that. He's going to be gone. And we may not have as much weave Trump. If he does become president, he's going to be up there. Either way, we're going to get less weave Trump. If he loses, he's going to eventually just disappear and go and play golf. If he wins, he's going to disappear and play golf. Or he's going to actually have to be president and do work, hopefully. And he won't be weaving and talking and doing rallies as much. So either way, we're going to lose all of this entertainment we've had. Are you ready for that? Because it's coming. The dearth. The big void of less news. Are we ready for that, or less crazy, outlandish things?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You can't do that? You can't. And so Rogan told Trump, your weave is getting wide. And the Trump mused that he gets publicity without trying, which is true. And he couldn't explain why. And then Rogan said the answer was easy, because Trump says wild things, and he used an expletive there. So that's going to not be as bad. Then Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to have to entertain us, and Lisa Boebert. The Boebert lady. It's Lisa or Laura, I forget. So there are tons of podcasts that started during the pandemic. Many of those podcasts do not still exist today. And that is true. So many people, they think it's so easy to start a podcast. Wouldn't that be cute to start a podcast? I've got friends, we could do a podcast.
Right.
And they get some publicity. They get some attention. They get some popularity. It goes to their head. They go crazy. Maybe they make some money. But to keep it going, just look at the William and Meghan Markle. They had a podcast that was supposed to happen on Spotify. They did a couple and then it ended, even though they got paid a lot of money. They didn't, I guess, fulfill that part of the contract. The rate of new podcast creation has gone back to pre-pandemic levels. It says here, look who's here.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that?
Yeah, we have Nilly the horse here. He's hanging out, and we also poured you a root beer because we heard that your throat was getting a little dry, a little raspy, and you're starting to cough a lot.
Yeah, coughing. Do you know that? I'm coughing, which you shouldn't do on a podcast, or I'm coughing in my mind and not on the mic because I don't want to assault the listener with that. Edison Research's annual Infinite Dial Survey is considered one of the best sources for information on U.S. podcast listeners. According to the 2022 report, about 177 million have listened to at least one podcast. That equates to 62% of Americans. So over half. A little less, 41% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly, while 26% listen to podcasts weekly. So there are a lot of listeners. And the fact that they have listened to at least one podcast, 26%, that's great. Now, does that mean they listen to one and they never listen to another one? It's good to see the 26% of Americans listening weekly because that seems the most frequency. Do they listen daily? If they listen daily, hello, I'm Mike's Daily Podcast, and I bring it to you daily, and I hope that has helped. So I hope some of this has been interesting to you with the podcast discussion. It certainly is in the news these days. This medium has gotten really popular. This is probably the peak. I don't think it has ever gotten as big. They do say that Joe Rogan had something like 6 million views of the podcast he did with Elon Musk, but that took a while. That is up until now. So that's however long ago that podcast happened. But the amount of views that he had, the statistics that they did release seem to be pretty mind-boggling that Joe had with Trump within the first 24 hours. So
call Mike at the Café Anyway hotline.
What do you think?
Area code 510-228-4640.
I would love to hear from you. And now we go to the mainframe and hear about all things concerning this thing called Mike's Daily Podcast. We go to the mainframe and hear from A-Frame. Thank you so much for listening.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com.
Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com.
See you tomorrow. Bye.